Well, we have been talking about database, about other databases, about the Latvian qualifications database. We had about the experience of our foreign colleagues. But the aim of this discussion is to talk about the content which is included in the database, data on the quality of education, educational outcome, what the students expect or those who want to study expect. What do we get in the end? And what happens when a person has graduated? What will be the demand for this specialist in labor market? Also, the expectations of employers. That would be a wide range of circles. Perhaps we could start with Marta, Latvian Students' Union. What would be the main things if we think about the labor market, and we heard about it in the European context? A colleague, Karin van der Sanden, talked about European problems. Youth unemployment, aging society, these are problems, and we also see the problems in Latvia. What do you expect from all this? From the process that has been initiated, one process is database, the other aspect would be the content. What we expect, we want to dispel stereotypes about vocational education. Because if we think about prestige of education, vocational education has fallen behind. Students do not choose it. So we should explain about the qualifications, about compatibility, so we could draw attention of secondary school graduates. And also we should think about linking this information to labor market. And for students, it would be important to understand the differences between qualifications within one field. Are you environmental researcher or environment engineer? They should understand the differences, and we should also perhaps avoid fragmentation. We have 4 times more qualifications than in Slovenia. But apparently, we should address representatives of the institutions of higher education to deal with this problem. And definitely, students are interested in the possibility to recognize and to qualify also informal and informal learning. Apparently, we'll be able to learn from Slovenia. And of course, qualifications are very important in the context of mobility, so that the students would understand that 1 year's master's degree in the Netherlands is not the same as in Latvia, 3 years master or 2 years master. Well, we understand that in some other countries, some countries have more qualifications. For example, Poland has even more than Latvia. But you see this as a problem. For future students, this fragmentation makes it difficult to understand. There's a joke among students that apparently we will soon have engineers of the left front tire of a car, and they will know only this specific field, and they won't get broader general skills that are necessary, because we know there are certain general skills that everybody needs, certain digitalization skills, also social skills to sell their product. But we believe that qualifications should be combined and maybe more flexible. Irēna Kaminska from Daugavpils University, do you agree to this joke that this fragmentation makes environment difficult to understand? We are sometimes told that each university should be unique and should have unique programs, but we could then specialize. One university could provide a program on the left tire of the car and another on the right tire of the car. Well, but to speak seriously about it, we need this database because this gives you the full picture in Latvia and also in the context of the European Union. So we see the way qualifications of different levels differ. When we sent information about our diploma supplements to Academic Information Center, where we described our learning outcomes and study outcomes, that was a possibility for us to revise our diploma supplements. And also, when getting ready for this conference, I drafted a document. I took one study direction, bachelor, master's, and doctor's degree, and put together in one table skills, knowledge, and competence with respect to one study direction. And it looks very well. You see what is being taught on the bachelor's level, what is taught in the same direction on the master's level, and what is taught on the doctoral level. We were all getting ready for pilot accreditation. I think that perhaps this should be put into accreditation documents. Because for the universities, it's important to take a look. Sometimes bachelor and master's degrees overlap, and sometimes master's degree programs and doctoral degree programs overlap. We should compare the study outcomes that we are in general offering to the students, and if they look at it in the general context, then they can understand whether they need the master's level. Others perhaps will want to move on to the doctoral level or perhaps to another field. Mr. Jānis Gaigals. The same topic, the same question. First of all, I would like to commend organizers. This project, which seems to have a rather narrow task and objective to set up a qualifications database which is comparable to other European countries, and this could be the topic. But today we heard we saw that this whole topic was examined in the context of other databases, and in general, in the context of added value for different users. Talking about numbers, I'd say, well, some people say 1,000 or even more, but I don't see problems with numbers. I see there might be problems in structure. If the system has a clear structure, then from a small number of directions or small number of boxes, you can have different sub-boxes, but you have to provide a very clear structure for the system. And my wish for the future would be to try to put yourself in the shoes of the users, because we have very different users. Students just now told what they would expect from databases. Policy makers would want to have statistical data, and we saw that statistical data can be obtained. The question is whether we can obtain it all now. The question, it's about improving the system, our capability of improving. And one provocative question, perhaps this is not for the discussion of today, maybe that's for the informal part of the event. But I always, when I hear this definition that qualification is any document that attests of education, that is correct. But qualification can be proved not only by the document. Go to your doctor, go to your hairdresser, and you will understand that the education document is not the only criterion by which you assess qualification of a specialist. We should think about adding to the initial register of initial qualification, and then to add qualifications that has been obtained in practice. Then we would have produced a full system, a comprehensive system. And here we see certain sectoral fragmentation. We have educational system, educational programs, qualifications obtained as a result of education, and of course we tend our own garden plot in cooperation with other sectors, with other fields, with the labor market. But I believe we should take a broader look, and I wish to you to continue. Baiba, Ramina. Yeah, we are looking at this qualifications database from different vantage points. Students have their own perspective, universities have their own perspective, and Jānis Gaigals, of course, has his own. Well, of course, thank you for the good ideas also that you gave during establishing the database. And as you see, we have taken them into consideration and implemented many of these. But I look at it from my daily work, informing about qualifications, also thinking about diploma recognition, mobility. I see this as a wonderful tool because we can show what our qualification consists of, what in the qualification granted by Daugavpils or Riga University, Latvian University is included, how these differ. And we can also reflect our system of education. As Irēna said, the difference between bachelor's, master's, and doctoral level. Of course, there are things that we want to improve, and perhaps some things could be made better, but as a tool, so that we would be recognizable outside Latvia. I believe this is a very good tool.
Wojciech Szajnar is, as you know, from Poland. I would like to ask him, while you were shaping the database, what were the conclusions that you drew about the Polish education system for the compliance or consistency with the labor market? What were the students' expectations? What were your conclusions regarding the content specifically?
And it is very hard to answer that question in a few phrases, but I'll try. As I said in my presentation, between 75 and 80% of Polish employers find it difficult to find the right employee. And this situation is persistent. It lasts for 4 or 5 years for every single edition of our evaluation study. The qualification systems, however, Polish qualification framework and qualification register can only partially respond to that issue, because learning outcomes as presented in the database, it doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter how many qualifications are in the database, but let's assume there are plenty of them and the information is easily accessible. So this information can only give a certain. This is only a certain information for an employer, because he cannot. Because the most the issue that, or the candidates that the Polish employers are mostly seeking, or their competences they are not seeking qualifications. They are seeking specific competences that are mostly interpersonal competences or soft skills that cannot really be measured in terms of qualification or learning outcomes. For example, what is the most important is the work ethic. You cannot measure work ethic in a diploma or in a qualification put into the database, for example. So obviously you get a qualification database, you get a certain information about a person that can shorten your time for recruitment, or can give you a certain information about this person, what he can do, what he can achieve, but it cannot give you all the information you need for the recruitment, and you have to rely on something else. That's for sure. So if you talk about employers and the companies, the qualification systems only partially something that they need to have. Their expectations towards the education systems are different. They expect that the education system will somehow force people, for example, to work in teams. When I was in school in the 80s and 90s in Poland, we were forced to work alone. Each one was responsible for his own projects. And when we were asked to work in groups, it was always the same. I mean, someone was trying not to do anything but look good in a group. Someone was responsible so he was doing the work of everyone else, and so on and so on. So pretty much the working group in Polish education back then didn't really exist. So this was the expectation that could be put into the education system, but it's still not the issue of Polish qualification framework. This is something different. But with the qualification framework, the most important issue for the employers is the quality of validation. Because you have a qualification, you have a set of learning outcomes, but how can you be sure that someone really validated if a person really can do things that are written over there? And You have a number of validating institutions or certification institutes that provide training for certain qualifications. How do you make sure that they all operate on the same level, the quality level, so that the diplomas are comparable? And this is the very important issue right now at the moment in Poland. We will be opening a call for proposal for institutions of external quality assurance for the qualifications in Poland. And this is the system that I would, the part of the system that I would look at and perceive as the most important factor in making sure that the qualification system is recognizable and useful for employers.
Paldies, un manuprāt, tas ļoti svarīgs punkts, ko arī Gaigals.
Thank you. I think this coincides with what Mr. Gaigals said. Is just part of the validation or evaluation. One part is the qualifications, and the other thing is the professional training after work. I heard that the information might appear regarding for a 3-year period that follows up people who have graduated. This might be introduced in the state education system, providing that the goal would be to follow up percentually how many people work in the specific field after completing education, an education program. How is this going to be done? The state education information system will contain information on a personal level on students and data on these students who have completed study programs will be delivered to the State Revenue Service, and they will be able to obtain information on, say, who pays taxes for what. So what do you think of an idea of this? It probably gives some kind of a rating or accreditation points to certain educational programs or study programs. Let's not narrow it down to 3 years after completing studies. This is very topical, related to all educational institutions and all programs. What do these people do after they complete studies? The EU structural funds program requires actually following up results after completing some programs or projects. And currently, it is impossible to obtain such information or reliable information. Yes, polls are being made, but they are not completely reliable data. Also, information on the retraining for the unemployed. So my suggestion or recommendation would be to try to shape databases that are more or broader, that are generally state related to, say, the population register, and the data would be comprehensive so that we can plan resources. An example, say the environmental data, the State Revenue Service database. One column in the register would be on the education, and and it could contain information, say, on a lawyer. A person has graduated the Faculty of Law. So what is the development within 10 years? You could briefly obtain information. What do universities and educational institutions prepare? Has this person become a judge? Is he or she a lawyer, an attorney? So have we, or in other areas, have we prepared doctors or other professionals? So that's how we could then assess. Irēna, Kaminska, do you have polls in place or research according to what your alumni do? Yes, we poll both employees as well as the alumni, but I have to say they are not entirely objective because not everybody responds to them. Secondly, such polls are made by the by the university itself, and if you conduct a poll on yourself, you cannot be fully reliable. We have. It would be great if we had such kind of specific information at hand regarding who works where for how many years. But let's talk about the fifth level qualification that corresponds to the EU sixth or seventh level. If that person started out as a teacher, but in a couple of years, he or she, so to speak, ascends to the teacher's council. So we can't really assess whether this was a good professional that we prepared or not. One has to have the opportunity to change their profession, but you have to take heed of whether the one keeps the same qualification level. For example, one could acquire the sixth or seventh qualification level, but he or she goes and works at the cash register. And it's clear that it wasn't actually useful to prepare that kind of a professional. Is there a question? I have a consequential question, specifically related to students. To what extent do you think students are informed about their knowledges, skills, and competences? Can they think in such categories? And do they realize what they obtain from higher education? And do they realize what they can actually do on this basis? It is clear that in the higher education, these programs, unless the discussion is about specific professions, then we have to understand that programs open up various doors or various opportunities. To what extent students can define their own skills, knowledge, and competences themselves, and do they know what to do with them? I think that the knowledge, skills, and competences is a set of concepts that higher education experts know, and so to speak, a very elite club, whereas students don't really realize that. We have study results and learning results that are, or outcomes that are more popular among students. But in terms of learning outcomes, they understand in the sense of what is that they acquire as a result. Regardless of the fact, the qualification is a document that they regard as a guarantee that they can obtain. It would be very interesting to see whether curricula descriptions are what the students obtain or achieve, and it would be interesting to see whether this is actually followed up and registered or kept in any way. So now they actually move forward according to what they can obtain. Yes, the university typically talks about the study results, whereas students talk about learning outcomes. But generally, it is the same thing. I talk about the study results. Basically, this is obtained after enrolling in the university. I think all universities or higher educational institutions have initial classes where you have group curators or group directors engaged. In any case, first-year students are generally introduced to the student program and to the things that the students are to expect during the course of the next 3-4 years. And if the lecturers are good representatives of their trade, then at the very outset, they introduce the students with the learning outcomes, or as I call them, study results, and the necessary things or skills and knowledge that are required to complete specific programs, and definition of the outcomes, as well as the sum of requirements or information on what is necessary to complete the specific course is an integral part. This also all higher educational institutions should have all descriptions of program available for everyone else publicly, say on their websites. You wanted to add something. What I would like to say is that frequently when students join study programs, they receive questions such as, where are you going to work, as opposed to what are you going to acquire. In March this year, we held a seminar where we urged students to assess their study program descriptions, and we asked them to compare what the reality is. So we found that the differences are very big. So how could this be aligned? For example, when applicants are reading this information, or when they read information on which books they will need, or what the learning outcomes or what the skills will be. So currently it is not clear, right? And it complicates the selection of a study program. Yes, there are more successful examples, there are less successful examples, but this is kind of vague. So are there any questions or comments or things you want to add to what you have heard so far? Yes, please.
Especially since we have people, representatives from different institutions of education. I really liked what Mr. Gaigals said, and also a representative from Poland, because there's a difference between educational qualification. Well, we see all those questions, programs, two professors teach the same, but perhaps the programs are entitled differently. But what is important, what Mr. Gaigals said, is that the education that you have obtained is not yet a proof of the quality of your work. You might have the whole wall plastered with certificates, but that's not a proof of the way you work. For example, you can be well-dressed and pass an exam, but you might be a drug addict. And in such a case, you would never be given the right to steer a ship, even if you have passed all the exams. So this is the register, what you see. For example, if you are in crafts, you are an apprentice, and only after some years you can become a master. I believe that competence can be proved only in professional environment and in time. Well, of course, we have to think about categories and concepts. We can think about qualification within one company or within a sector. But really, to maintain a register of qualifications obtained in real work, that will require resources, and no one would be ready to maintain it. I think that we would need this additional column reflecting qualification and experience. But of course, you cannot ask now the employers to maintain this register. Apparently, the state should support it. Any other comments or questions? There is one. About monitoring. As the representative of the ministry said, there is an idea of linking the register of students with the state revenue service database. Of course, it is necessary and useful, but again, we might go to the other extreme. If we look around, labor market is international. Latvians work everywhere. So perhaps a naval academy will have a very low rating because the graduates work in different countries under different flags. And hotel and hospitality field, this is international. People can work all over the world. Music academy graduates, opera singers, they work all around the world. So we should take this aspect into account. Otherwise, if we look at the state revenue service data make, we will narrow down the monitoring. Very brief comment. My previous example about lawyers. Do not perceive this as the main criterion. I do not want to offend any lawyers, but the point is, employment in the specific field is only sub-criterion number 3 or 4. If we look at the sectorial policy planning, the first question is whether you are employed at all and whether you pay taxes. If you are not in the State Revenue Service database, this might mean that you are somewhere away or you are working illegally and you are not paying taxes. And the next point is the level of employment. Of course, highly qualified people usually receive higher remuneration compared to a person working at the teller in a store. And of course, finances, for example, will be working in all fields. So it's only one support instrument, this State Revenue Service database. Thank you. I could perhaps redirect this question to our colleagues from other countries, and perhaps Karin could answer this question. Is there an idea or the thought to monitor not only the qualifications of study programs, but also to monitor graduates and their work experience, which appears in a database? Any ideas like this? Have they been discussed on the level of European Commission to assess the experience of each employee?
Indeed, I have just highlighted some of the elements of the New Skills Agenda for Europe. There are other elements that I have not touched upon, but that have been discussed now, just now. One of them is indeed graduate tracking. There is a proposal that will be elaborated by, in this case, the Director General of Education and Culture, and they will come with a proposal for graduate tracking next year in 2017. So also at European level, there are high thoughts about that. Also, quality assurance is one of the important topics, especially within the EQF revision. So this doesn't touch the graduate tracking, but it is a topic that has been touched upon just now. Quality assurance, which indeed is very important and will get some extra attention in the EQF revision. Another element is indeed upskilling, lifelong learning. Well, I already mentioned that. We want to focus there on, at least with the skills guarantee. We will try to, this is about adults that need to be reskilled or upskilled to a certain level, so there is attention for. And then the last but certainly not least part is that next year also we will focus on the review of the key competences framework to see how best we can deal with the other skills than the hard job skills. So yeah, all the elements are touched and will be worked upon at European level as well. Yeah.
Paldies. Un varbūt jautājums arī visiem.
And now the question to all panel speakers. We heard that in some countries we are talking not only about qualifications that we acquire from accredited institutions, but also courses and some other additional opportunities of education. What have been the ideas in Latvian context, how to add these qualifications to characterize each individual or his or her CV? Well, the answer is one example. Qualification which is obtained informally can be recognized, validated. And this system has been functioning since 2011. But talking about state education information system, how many people have gone through this process? Perhaps after some time you might have information also about this, but not immediately. And the question is, who is registering these qualifications? Because each institution recognizes these documents itself. Informally obtained qualifications, this is registered by Education Quality Service. So we have number of registers and we have number of courses of continuous education. But each institution has its own register. Actually, we lack a uniform registry of information about the qualifications that specialists have obtained. And one example how this system could create a misconception or distorted impression. When during the crisis we looked at unemployed persons, very many of them were in the construction sector. But if you look at those who had come from construction sector, these were secondary school students and or first-year university students. Perhaps only 5% had qualification of builders. Others were just working in construction. And I remember that during government meetings, we kept hearing that so many people from construction are unemployed, so we should limit enrollment in those vocational schools. And as a result, we have only one construction vocational education school. That was a mistake. But inertia plays a very important role. I might add that's only one perspective on these informal qualifications. I believe that we have not yet brought order into this field. Not all certificates, not all documents will be part of qualification or part of qualification framework. We have all kinds of courses. Perhaps currently we haven't got a mechanism. For example, you can complete accountants courses, continuous professional education, 40 hours, 20 hours, 160 hours. That would be already professional. We have also some courses and programs in 600 hours, and some take 3 years. And sometimes the certificate of the institution which is organizing those courses contains very important qualification, but they do not provide appropriate content. And this is an issue that we will have to deal with in the future. A proposal, if I may. If these documents were issued not by the people who implement the project, but the sector which assesses the true qualifications, that would be a credible document. But this is a question of the resources and possibilities of the sectors. I know that in some countries this is really developed. I have heard that in Estonia, many qualifications are granted by professional associations or specially accredited qualification centers. In fact, not those who implement the program should not be assessing it. What about the experience in Poland? You talked about those qualifications which are not defined by law, but that people apply for voluntarily. How does that happen?
We are still the non-formal education. This is still a huge issue in Poland because. As I said, we have a very low lifelong learning participation level, and we believe that one of the key factors is the quality of non-formal education that people perceive in Poland as something of a low quality. So we are now working with the training providers. We have put in place an accreditation system for training providers, for training companies to assure the quality of their work. We are also running a database of their services that the services that we, I'm also responsible for that project, that we accredited, meaning that we want to make sure that what people are getting as a training courses is something of a good quality. But going to the subject of qualifications, we I believe that one of the solutions of making sure that the qualifications are very relevant and they are very useful is to invite stakeholders from different sectors and let them work within the sector, obviously, to develop, we call it a sectoral qualification framework. In Poland, the different institutions, not mine, my institution is giving grants to Ministry of Education is giving grants to organizations to develop sectoral qualification frameworks to be included in the qualification framework. The idea is to invite employers, public, social partners, training institutions, education, etc., all within one sector, and to let them elaborate or prepare qualification framework that could be very useful in that specific sector. We are also developing a project called Sectoral Skill Councils that's more for like forecasting the demand for qualifications. The idea is not to develop qualifications in general, but to work together within a sector, obviously, among the stakeholders of the sector to forecast the demand to bring closer the business and the education, to exchange ideas, to exchange knowledge about themselves. Well, at the end, the qualification is only useful when it is used. I mean, it's not, because qualification is a methodological concept, and if it's a concept developed by someone who is far from the practice, it remains a concept. I don't know if I'm clear about saying that, but and that's why we believe that working within the sectors, like sectoral skill councils or sectoral qualification frameworks, that's difficult words, I'm sorry. That's the best way to make qualifications really reliable and relevant to the public.
Paldies. Cik man zināms, Latvijā arī līdz.
Thank you. I think that the similar sectoral groups, I think that there is an official title for them in Latvia. During the previous programming period, professional maps or professional studies were developed for 14 professions, and councils were established. And according to common methodology, the representatives of the specific sectors shaped them. And these councils solve various sectoral matters. So did you come to closer to conclusions, say regarding certificates that are being issued? Was quality monitored? Well, in life there were many discussions, but the sectors that looked at the experts that they assigned to participate in examinations and look at the students who fail to acquire qualifications, the attitude changed greatly. I don't want to point out the specific sector in which this took place, but serious, honest attitude towards the examination helps the situation. And students then seriously prepare for the examinations, whereas the employers later on believe in the validity of the specific certificates. Yes, this is a question of trust and reliance. I would like to add a little bit. With us, it is so that we have the state examination final committees in educational institutions, and the procedure lays down that at least half of the commission, so 3 out of 5, should be representatives of the employers. We would want to improve the quality immediately, just to see the products that come out of the university. We could also review the cabinet regulations and to think about how maybe experts could examine the the students without the presence of university representatives, or maybe increase the number of employers. It used to be so that at least one lecturer had to take, for representing another university, had to take part in the examinations. This should be reintroduced because there are academic programs that just manufacture, literally manufacture their students for professional work, say the chemists. So you want neutral, objective assessors, not the higher educational institution, but representatives of other higher educational institutions or employers. Let us return to the key tasks of the database or establishment of the database, which is related to the students. Now, let's say somebody graduates and they leave Latvia to go look for a job. So does what they have learned comply or consist with the employers in the other countries to what they have learned and what the employers expect? Well, it is very difficult to assess that kind of students. Some students leave and they don't really respond to any polls or questionnaires. But within the scope of Erasmus mobility and within the scope of what we can identify is that the systems elsewhere in Europe seem to be higher in terms of flexibility, and it is actually the backward problem that when people return from other countries in Latvia, that they face lower flexibility. Sometimes we see that these problems are related to mobility. Universities have trusted each other. They have concluded agreements, but when after the students return from these universities or educational institutions, they have problems with alignment and compatibility. So how does it look from your perspective? I have a comment regarding what was said. This might be something that could be aimed at students. As we heard, Mr. Gaigals as well as Mrs. Kaminska mentioned that many from the labor market are taking place in final examinations. So if programs are accredited and if representatives from employers are there, and if the diploma or certificate is obtained, then it should be so that the student has acquired the knowledge, skills, and competences regardless of the level. Maybe the problem is elsewhere. Maybe the problem lies in the so-called lack of career management skills. So we sort of describe everything, we do everything, but students are incapable of defining or understanding what it is, what to do with it. They sort of expect something, as in the fairy tale of the dormant princess. She's waiting for the prince to come and wake her up, but maybe they have to be a little bit more knowledgeable in this regard. This might be related to the problem where they have a hard time with fitting into the labor market and why employers do not receive the respectively or correspondingly knowledgeable employees, because students are not sufficiently motivated to understand and to acquire what is potentially going to be required. Yes, the ones who additionally learn on their own are much more interested in are much more interesting for the labor market as opposed to those who just try to get by. What we see in terms of students from other countries, they frequently have mentors, not just academic mentors. It's just people engaged to them who do not tell them off for poor grades, but instead they introduce them to the ideas, what potential skills will take them where. For example, what is if they no longer remember what was told to them on their first day of university, and if they say require more engagement from the academic side. Currently, these initiatives are underway and they're being developed. There are certain universities where career centers are present. However, this should be expanded, and probably student passiveness of students is there to some extent. Thank you. Maybe Wojciech has something to add regarding the mobility of graduates of Poland. So how do they fit in the European context when they look for labor opportunities? Do you have any studies or conclusions in place?
Only some general thoughts. I'm not really a specialist on that issue. There are around 2 million Poles living in the European Union outside Poland. So the mobility, 2 million citizens of Poland. So the mobility is huge, that you can say that, but the causes are not very, it's not like the general mobility of people that they love working elsewhere. To some extent, obviously, there are people like this, but it's the probably necessity that forces them to move elsewhere and work, mostly beyond their qualifications. So as for the students that are that are willing to or wanting to work abroad, and it's just the way they are or their ambitions, then I don't see it as a problem. They do it. They do it all the time, and the database of qualifications at the moment in Poland is not really of any help to them, because they tend to get information from other sources. Mostly, it's about the somehow reputation of the university that matters, but not the qualification formally obtained during studies.
Paldies. Ir kas piebilstams?
Anything you'd like to add? We could continue with the previous question, because at the end of the day, today's topic is databases and the comparability of information, which is the aim of this project. And in terms of this project, I have a question that maybe the representative of the European Commission could elaborate on from the systemic perspective. Currently, we are under the impression that each member state is developing their own databases, trying to adapt to not very clear or accurate basic principles. Maybe the basic principles are there, and we fully support them in the respect that qualifications need to be structured and shaped. However, this common situation, if it consists of all of the member states' databases, it's one system and frequently has the same name, whereas the content is completely different in terms of qualifications. This means that deep descriptions for comparability need to be in place. And secondly, if we use resources or pool resources to combine or an informal sample database, one could agree or not agree with it, but in any case, one could compare their own database. This could also apply to the qualification framework. Maybe that would take less time, because we have been discussing this for some 15 years. Can you respond to this?
There are a lot of elements in here. One of them I would like to start with is that the competence of the European Union lies not in education and training. So it's the member states who are responsible for their education and training, how they develop their systems, how they write their qualifications, what terminology they use, how they structure. Anything that has to do with that is the competence of the member states. And they are very keen on that. What we try to do at European level indeed is to get agreement on how we could best approach things, and then again it's up to the member states if they yes or no take on board the suggestions that we together elaborate. The European Qualifications Framework is one of the results of that collaboration and the proposal and the attempt to align better the different systems and the qualifications in it to get the comparability. So the qualifications framework, the European qualifications framework, with the invitation to the member states to develop their national qualifications frameworks and align it to the levels of the EQF, is an attempt. Another attempt is indeed the invitation we have made to the national qualifications frameworks, to the member states, to develop qualifications databases. And not so that we will have 28 qualifications databases, but that in the end we can connect the 28 qualifications databases at European level. Obviously, for this, you need agreements on what the structure of such a database would be. So on the technical side and partly also on the content side, how would you do that? We have had discussions for over 4 years to come to an agreement to a minimum set of information that everyone would then publish. 4 years to come to the agreement that it would be required to at least produce information on the learning outcomes, on the EQF level, on the field of education and training derived from the ISCET fields, and there are 3 or 4 more information fields that are required for the interconnection. We have now added a couple of fields that are optional. But again, this has taken a long time to get that far. So yes, there is this basis, and now also our grants, we issue the grants. If member states make use of the grants, they also agree then to use these structures. And also, obviously, at European level, the structures evolve, so that there is little incremental change. But so we work on that. We work on that approach. Then there is this other important element, because that's about structuring things and interconnecting things. But then the learning outcomes, the content of the qualification, how is it described? That's one of the most important things that then should become clear. There we have tried to work at least then with the structure that it should be structured in knowledge, skills and competences, which is a minimum structure, but even that is very, very difficult, so that's not obligatory. Also because you have to work with qualifications that already exist for a long time. So structuring that information is not an easy task, because you work with exactly what I said, existing things. Newly developed qualifications might follow that structure, but that's then again not obligatory. And we have discussed now, and we are discussing, and we will discuss in the future, and it is a part of the proposal of the EQF recommendation, to come to a common approach to describe learning outcomes. So yes, we are working on it, but it will take a long time. And in the meantime, the developments in the member states obviously will continue, and we will have to try to bring things together in such a way that we can, on the one hand, respect the subsidiarity, as we call it, of the member states on education and training, and on the other hand, find ways to interconnect and combine the information.
Paldies.
Thank you. So the question now, perhaps Baiba could comment. What's your impression? Will it be possible to combine databases? Yes, it will be possible, but there's another thing that I have too many mics now. What we should learn, we should learn to form a respectful attitude towards the qualification of our own country and qualifications of other countries. Let's recall that in 1997, when we signed the Lisbon Recognition Convention, we agreed that we are transferring from equivalence to comparability, and we are not looking for which words differing, but we are looking whether indeed significant differences exist that would allow us to say that qualifications are different. And to add to what the students said, if sometimes some things are not recognized in mobility, I have to say that if the institutions of higher education have agreed on mobility and something is not recognized, then you should complain and talk about it in a loud voice. This should not happen like this anymore. We are talking about comparability and not about equivalence, and that should be taken into account. And these are compatible. They are compatible now, and we should learn to treat qualifications, our own and those of other countries, with respect and to read them correctly. Thank you. Anything else to add or to comment at this point? By the way, my very concrete question about mobility, perhaps I've missed something. There was also a scandal described in the Latvian press that Cambridge did not recognize a secondary education document that should be the basis for continuing studies. Has this issue been settled? Was it a problem of communication or qualification? It really does not pertain to the topic of today. Well, perhaps it's important for students. This issue is being dealt with. I know that National Education Center has contacted a number of times with the university and also with institutions in England. We have provided answers to questions about our system of education. They are not in a hurry. And perhaps they had outdated information. England, in general, can be characterized by unwillingness to recognize qualification systems of other countries. We are not the only country complaining about it. But I believe that this issue will be dealt with. At least people are working on it. Thank you. Now we have the opportunity to ask really the very last questions and give the very last comments. Another comment from the point of view of employer. Whatever we are doing and discussing, it's all very fine, but I will just give you information to reflect on. I just visited 2 companies that assessed students, interns, and trainees, and we're thinking how to give grants. And there's one question. The question was, how much can you do? And these questions were taken from the professional standard. And this was mainly questions about attitude, about professional ethics, because we cannot teach specific technical skills because technology keeps evolving very fast. And I also met some students and pupils in Gulbene. And then we went to an employer, and we saw that employers really assess the attitude of future employees. And we are not discussing this sufficiently. So we should introduce in our fields also this sort of recognition of your qualifications in working environment. There was someone wishing to say something. Sandra Sproģe from Latvian University of Agriculture. The database is ready. It has been launched. We have seen it. How are you going to maintain it in the future? We gave huge amount of data, all the universities, and we are not frozen in time. We are probably going to change something. We are going to redefine the outcomes. How are you going to maintain the database and update it? I believe Indra is ready to answer. Thank you for your question. As you understood, the first stage of the project is completed on the 30th of November, but we have also the second stage until end of May 2018, and at least it's quite clear that within this period of time, all the information will be updated and supplemented. We are now thinking about ways of providing these data also to other data systems so that they could be used. For example, register of study directions, so that this all work you have contributed would not be lost. And after the second stage, it will not remain in a lonely island somewhere. Otherwise, it wouldn't. This wouldn't be it's not only database that keeps evolving, but the Latvian qualifications framework and European qualifications framework keep developing. So we'll be always open to you and we'll be ready to update your information. Thank you. These are almost like concluding words, but nevertheless, I will give now the opportunity to our panelists to give perhaps very brief comment or concluding words of this discussion. Perhaps Wojciech, you could be the first.
Well, I believe that what we had today during the whole conference is that we are more or less in the same stage or in the same boat, I guess, with the qualifications. We are struggling I believe that we are all struggling with the same problems or same ideas. I would say that there are two main things that I would like to underline at the very end. One is to never forget about the quality of qualifications. That's I repeated that during my presentation. I said it in the panel and I will say it now. The quality of what it is inside the qualification is the most important factor of the system, because that would in the future guarantee its reliability and relevance. And the second thing is to keep it up to date, because that's at the very end that the question that was posed is that it's never the static picture. I mean, the qualification evolves. It has to be evaluated from time to time. It has to be considered or looked at from the perspective of the labor market, whether the qualification is still relevant, whether the qualification offers anything to any of the stakeholders, and it's just not the empty methodological figure of no use. Right? Thank you.
Paldies. Marta, Megne.
Thank you, Marta. We are very happy that we have come thus far and that we have developed such database. We, the students, might wish to combine, to connect all these databases so that they could be used in the future. Irēna, Kaminska. Huge work has been done. And all people working in the system of education have been involved to produce this database. We had to adopt qualifications framework. We had to define study outcomes for the programs for each study course. So my wish would be, please continue working. And as the students said, we would really want to see this database connected, interlinked with other databases so that we could see the whole picture. Well, I guess that it was my turn to speak. There are two topics, awareness and information. And I believe that Academic Information Center has been already working, has been worked for a year and even before that to raise awareness about the European qualifications framework. And so this awareness has been evolving. So this is a continuation. And let's hope that this information will become more and more applicable and that this information will be compatible with other databases. And then we'll be happy to meet again and again. And Baiba, Ramina. Oh, thank you for your good, nice words. These were not two easy years for us. We had discussions. I'm not talking about procurement at all. And I believe that the outcome is very promising, very hopeful. Of course, the qualifications database should be improved. Perhaps we have to improve many things. Perhaps we have to discuss some things with employers. But as Jānis said, we have been involved for a long time, and I recall that in December we'll have a seminar for one group. We found a group which apparently knows nothing about qualification frameworks. So To conclude, I believe that if we continue working and cooperating like this, we have here people from other countries, from the European Commission, from very diverse institutions here in Latvia. If we continue working together, then we will make our Latvian qualifications recognizable and readable and correctly understood all over the world, so be able to function here in Latvia and outside. Thank you, Baiba, Ramina, all the panelists, and also thanks to all of us.